It's the Battle of Britain. Railgun Max breaks a Kit Kat, and is Hydra the king of the flippers? Find out this week in Robot Combat. Hello and welcome to This Week in Robot Combat, the news show that also features reviews now, I guess. We're going to start with a review of BattleBots, the most recent episode 3 of Season 9, and then we'll crack on with the news as usual, because I've only got one episode to review this week, so let's crack on. First of all, we had Scorpios versus Copperhead. For me, this is one of only two disappointing fights in this episode. Copperhead were my picks going into this fight. Unfortunately, they didn't do as well as I'd hoped. Well, they did, but then they didn't. I'll explain. So they went in with their drum looking all scuffed up on one side. I'm not sure why that is. Apparently the Team Scorpios, Ryan Beach, gives an answer on that in the Robocast this week on Samuel's channel. So I'll have to check that out later on. But yeah, I currently don't know why their drum looked the way it did. Speaking of Orion Beach, he's no longer the team captain of Team Scorpios, but he's still on the team. He's still there. It's the Bot Bash Party Service guys who are now team captains, I guess. Copperhead won the ground clearance battle easily. They got underneath Scorpios all the time. Scorpios kept getting dinged up and having to do the weird wheelie thing where they get back onto their base. Scorpios' front ends, or the front wedge things, got bent right up, more so than the inward bits usually are. But yeah, Copperhead, it was obvious they were having drive issues all the way through this fight, and then I suppose they just lost, didn't they? They just stopped driving, and Scorpios didn't die, and so won the fight. Though I think their overhead spinner was ineffective in this fight, so less won, perhaps more didn't lose. Next up we have Bloodsport versus Lucky, which was an amazing bout. Lucky went in with their big wedge. Bloodsport struggled to spin up at times, so this should have been Lucky's fight to win. Unfortunately, it was Lucky's fight to lose. They malfunctioned. Their puncher kept doing that for about a good minute, and then we didn't see it fire again, so that was interesting. I'm wondering what happened there, whether it was a wire getting caught or something. That seems to be the my main theory anyway. Bloodsport went in for the kill once they realised that Lucky wasn't really working. They removed his side wheel pod, which exposed one of the wheels. Lucky only having 2 wheels in this fight, the front 2 instead of 4 wheels, including the back 2 as well. That didn't happen. They just had the 2 at the front and some sort of weird block on the back so that they didn't drag along the arena floor. What happened next? Well, a big shock as Bloodsport managed to remove the front wedge, which was like, how? This is a newbie team. You sort of forget that newbie teams can be quite so destructive. I think it's really comparable, I don't know how to say that word, to 2 fights last season. So the first one, a newbie team coming in and doing amazingly well, so that's Monsoon versus Red Devil is my example of that last season. And then an example of Lucky being beaten up in its first attempt was them versus Son of Waiachi, where the same sort of thing happened last year. So BattleBots just enjoy beating Lucky up in their first fight, I suppose. I absolutely love Bloodsport, and I hope they do well this season. But that was sort of that fight. Bloodsport wins the fight by judge's decision. Right, next we have Free Shipping versus Hydra. Hydra was being built up before this fight as the best flipper in BattleBots. Nah, I'm sorry, but Branko is clearly much better. A, because you sort of have to earn the title of best flipper. You can't just come in and say, we're the best flipper! And then, no, that's not how that works. Even in the sort of behind the scenes bit, they were showing off the differences between Bronco and Hydra. Showed how high it was getting a flip, how many flips. Hydra has to get right in underneath something before it can flip, whereas Bronco just sort of has to be there to go. And I suppose that comes with time and practice. Team Waiachi don't think, to my knowledge, have ever practiced with a flipper, so this is something very new to them, and they'll get better over time, but currently Bronco is still the best flipper. Yet to see it fight though, need to see it fight next week, I think. That's who I'm predicting will fight next week. I got my prediction of who would fight this week right, more on that in a minute. Free shipping were doing well early on, they were getting underneath Hydra. Hydra mistiming flips left, right and centre, but they eventually did get a good flip on free shipping. Free shipping did sort of a triple spiral through the air, but they managed to stick the landing somehow, and that was sort of my... Do you know in old BattleBots they used to do hit of the week or something like that? Well, that would be mine for this week, because it was really good. Well, either that or one later on. Hydra then got another good flip on free shipping. Free shipping got overturned, and their weapon was broken, so they couldn't self-right, and so Hydra won, which was a bit of a shame to stop the fight so soon, but well done to Hydra, decent fight. Monsoon versus Ragnarok, told you they'd fight this week. Ha! Right, this is the other disappointing fight of the episode. I was really looking forward to this one going in. Ragnarok went in with a little spike on the end of their axe to puncture the weak top armour of Monsoon, because that's usually plastic, and get to the batteries. Monsoon secretly armoured their top in Hardox, so that was never going to happen. It was just going to go ping and go flying off. Although that never happened, because Monsoon, trying to avoid the wedge, hit the wedge, and then they got another hit, dinged up Ragnarok. Ragnarok got turned over, and that was it. Their weapon broke or something, so they couldn't right themselves, and that was that. I know both Tim and Tom and Tim, they're the best of friends, they wanted to make the fight last a long time and potentially go to the judges, because they really wanted to dial in their machines. They also wanted to put on a good show for the audience, but unfortunately they couldn't do that this time. So we move on to Mad Catter versus Railgun Max. This was another awesome fight, and again potentially features a hit of the episode. Mad Catter's team captain is thoroughly bananas. I love him. He's amazing. He's just so good. Railgun Max is the better Chinese bot, as predicted. I thought they probably would be. They look gorgeous. They are absolutely amazing. The headline here is that Mad Catter got turned into a Kit Kat, which happened a few times last season, most notably to Vanquish. This is the Vanquish hit of this season so far, so yeah, getting Kit-Catted. I'm going to have to create a new verb. To be Kit-Catted is to have one's bot broken into one or more parts. It seems like a bit of a design flaw, however Bullfrog, which is our fighting robot, has wheels on the side that can be detached for ease of moving. It's all about modular designs. What we've learnt basically is modular designs don't work with egg beaters. So that's the thing. Yeah, that's sort of that fight. Mad Catter lose. There we are. Breakerbox versus Falcon. This was a good fight that lost speed later on. Breakerbox came in full wedge mode. Falcon is a flawed design, unfortunately, if you ask me. My opinion. The drums are great, but the body is not. Their wheels, they struggle to turn. Massively struggle to turn. Breakerbox dominated this match with ease. Falcon had nothing for Breakerbox until they lost power. Breakerbox could barely move, and then Falcon, though it looked to be in a similar state, managed to sort of just shred the wedge a bit. I don't know, but yeah, they could barely move. It went to a judge's decision. Breakerbox weren't counted out because it was very close to the end of the fight, and Breakerbox obviously won, so that was good. Lastly, Bite Force versus Yeti. Not as one-sided as I had thought going in. This was a really good fight. I really enjoyed it. Yeti took the fight to Bite Force. Unfortunately, Bite Force had an answer most of the time and countered their attacks. However, near the end, I did notice that Bite Force, they managed to sort of lose some sort of drive on one side. which didn't really hinder them at all because by that point Yeti was a dying machine. They'd got caught on one of their lifters and that was that. Yeti lost the fight, but it was a judge's decision. Both went through to the 3 minutes, and Bite Force were worried about Yeti going in, and rightly so. They did very well. So perhaps Yeti could be the machine to beat Bite Force, perhaps, at some point in the future. So that's it for the review. Let's crack on with some other news. At this current moment in time, Robots Live is in Grantham for a weekend of robot fighting. It's the final day of the show, and so far we've seen many different fights from many different robots, including the return of Apollo and Vulcan to the arena, but Eruption and Iron Ore 6, we know, are through to today's semi-final, so best of luck to them. I hope they do well. Speaking of live events, it's the final part of the Extreme Robots Portsmouth series on YouTube today at 7 PM, so make sure you check out their Facebook page or YouTube channel to watch it live. Now, something I didn't get to mention on the video last week that I mentioned on Facebook instead, but that's because we had the full BattleBots review last week, was the Extreme Scrutiny Club, a new podcast looking at different robots from Robot Wars history and seeing if they are going to go into the Halls of Fame or down into the Pit of Oblivion. Last week we saw Behemoth go up against Thermidor 2 and Detonator. It was very entertaining, so go and give it a listen if you haven't already, and they are back next week with a new episode. If you enjoyed my review, there are plenty more reviews of this week's BattleBots, including the RoboCast with interviews with Tom Brewster from Team Monsoon and Orion Beach from Team Scorpios. Mr. Psycho will return later this week. Lastly, Ed's Robots are also going to be reviewing this episode, so make sure you check out their channel as well. Now, earlier on in this video I mentioned the Bullfrog, our fighting robot. It now has a Facebook page, so go and check that out for all the latest Bullfrog news. And currently I'm asking the question, which of these 3 logos is the best? I cannot decide out of the 3, so I'm leaving it up to you guys, up to the actual Robot Wars club that have the robot, and I've asked a few other people as well, so I'd love to hear your opinion on it. Lastly, I'd previously mentioned that I would be recording a special episode of the Grand Slam titled The Whiteboards. Well, that episode was filmed yesterday with fights between all of the robots on screen now. It was a decent episode to film, and it's a chance for me to check out the new lights and everything in this new shed, so make sure when it comes out you give it a watch. Tell me what you think of it, tell me what needs to change. I need to know so that I don't muck it up when the actual series comes around. And that's the news for this week and the review of this week's BattleBots. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, do subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I shall see you next week for more of this probably, as well as maybe some other stuff as well. We'll see if I can get the whiteboards edited for a few weeks' time, so that will be interesting. And make sure you check me out on Facebook, World of Woodrow. The link is in the description below, as will be a link to my Patreon for supporting the Grand Slam itself, so if you feel you can, please do support me on that. There are several perks in place. That'll do for this time. I shall see you next week. Bye bye.